Dr. Eleanor Wright wiped sweat from her brow as the Arizona summer heat penetrated the basement archives of the Bisbee Historical Society. At 53, the history professor had spent 3 decades excavating forgotten stories. But this sabbatical year promised something special. Bisbee's copper mining boom had drawn thousands in the late 1800s, and Eleanor was determined to piece together the social fabric of this once thriving frontier town. "I think I've got something interesting here, Marcus," she called to her research assistant, a doctoral student from the University of Arizona. "Another box from the Copper Queen Hotel donation." Marcus wheeled over a small cart loaded with acid-free gloves and archival tools. "Let's see what we've got," he said, his enthusiasm undimmed despite the 3 weeks they'd spent cataloguing mundane business ledgers and correspondence. Eleanor carefully lifted the lid of the dusty wooden box. Inside lay several leather-bound journals, newspaper clippings, and a sealed envelope. The envelope was yellowed with age, its edges frayed, but the wax seal remained intact. 1881. School District Number 2 records, she read from the faded handwriting. "This could be related to the old schoolhouse on Brewery Gulch," Marcus nodded. "The one that burned down in the late 1890s. "The very same," Eleanor confirmed, gently breaking the seal. Inside was a folded document, a class registry, and something that made Eleanor's pulse quicken. A daguerreotype photograph, surprisingly well preserved. The image showed 37 children arranged in 3 rows with their teacher, a stern-looking woman in her 40s with a high-collared dress and her hair pulled back severely. "Remarkable condition," Marcus muttered, studying the image through a magnifying glass. "Look at their faces, so serious." No one smiled for photographs back then. Eleanor took the magnifying glass, examining the children's solemn expressions. Photography was still relatively new technology. Exposure times were long. Standing still was... She stopped abruptly. "What is it?" Marcus asked. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly. "Look at the back row, 3rd child from the left." Marcus leaned in. The child was pale, almost unnaturally so, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly into the camera, directly at them, while the other children gazed slightly off-center. "Probably just positioned that way," Marcus suggested. "Maybe," Eleanor said, unconvinced. "Let's scan this and get it digitized. I want to see it in higher resolution." Later that evening, Eleanor sat alone in her rented cottage. The desert night eerily quiet except for the occasional coyote howl. Her laptop displayed the high-resolution scan of the photograph. She zoomed in on the back row, focusing on that one child. Something about those eyes. As the image enlarged, Eleanor noticed a faint inscription on the back of the bench where the children sat. She enhanced the contrast, bringing the barely visible scratched letters into focus. "They're not children." Eleanor's blood ran cold. She looked again at the child's face, zooming closer still, and saw what she'd missed before. The subtle wrongness in the proportions, the aged quality in those hollow eyes. Not a child's eyes at all. She reached for her phone to call Marcus, but stopped when her screen suddenly flickered. For a moment, just a split second, she thought she saw the child's head turn slightly toward her in the image. Eleanor slammed the laptop shut, her heart pounding. She told herself it was just exhaustion, a trick of the light, her imagination working overtime. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just looked into something she wasn't meant to see. Morning brought clarity and embarrassment. Eleanor chided herself for getting spooked by an old photograph. After 2 cups of strong coffee, she returned to her research with renewed objectivity. "I've matched most of the names from the class registry to census records," Marcus announced when she arrived at the archives. "Typical immigrant mix for Bisbee, Irish, Cornish, Mexican, and a few German families." Eleanor nodded, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. "What about the child in the back row, the one with the unusual appearance?" Marcus consulted his notes. "According to the seating chart, that would be James Caldwell. Age 11, son of Thomas Caldwell, a mine supervisor at the Copper Queen." Any records of what happened to the family? That's where it gets interesting, Marcus said, pulling up a digitized newspaper article on his tablet. The Arizona Daily Star, December 18th, 1881. Tragedy strikes mining family. Thomas Caldwell, his wife Mary, and their son James were all found dead in their home. Apparent murder-suicide. Thomas shot his wife and son before turning the gun on himself. Eleanor frowned. When was the school photograph taken? October 15th, 1881, about 2 months before their deaths. So James was already dead when the photo was taken. Marcus looked confused. No, the deaths were in December, the photo was in October. Check the date again, Eleanor insisted. The registry entry. Marcus flipped through his notes, then rechecked the original document. His expression changed. You're right. The registry shows James Caldwell died of typhoid fever on September 30th, 1881. 2 weeks before the photo was taken. A chill ran through Eleanor, despite the archive's poor air conditioning. That's impossible. He couldn't be in the photo. Clerical error? Marcus suggested. Maybe they recorded the wrong date of death. Maybe, Eleanor said, unconvinced. What about the teacher? Miss Augusta Winters, taught at the school from 1879 until it burned down in 1897. She survived, but was severely burned, lived as a recluse until her death in 1912. Eleanor stared at the photograph again. I want to find out where she lived after the fire. She might have left diaries or letters. Records showed that after the school fire, Augusta Winters had moved to a small cottage on the outskirts of town, now part of the expanded Evergreen Cemetery. The property had been demolished in the 1950s, but Eleanor wondered if any of Miss Winters' possessions might have been preserved. A call to the cemetery's administrative office yielded an unexpected lead. We do have a box of effects from Miss Winters, the cemetery manager told her. When they expanded the grounds in '53, they found a metal lockbox buried under the floorboards of her cottage. Nobody ever claimed it, so it's been sitting in our storage room ever since. That afternoon, Eleanor and Marcus sat at a table in the cemetery office, a tarnished metal box between them. Inside were several journals bound in faded leather, a small wooden crucifix, and a sealed envelope addressed simply, "To whoever finds James." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single page written in tight, controlled script. I know what I saw that day in Mr. Henderson's photography studio. I know what developed in that image, though none of the others would believe me. James Caldwell had been dead for 15 days when we posed for that photograph. I attended his funeral. I placed flowers on his small casket, yet there he stood among my pupils, his skin grey, but his eyes, God help me, his eyes alive with something I dare not name. When I received the photograph 2 weeks later, I nearly lost my mind. Since then, I have seen him watching from windows, from the edge of the schoolyard. The others are beginning to follow him. Heaven forgive me for what I've done. The journal entries were even more disturbing, detailing Augusta's growing paranoia that dead children were infiltrating her classroom. She wrote of cold spots, objects moving, and children reciting lessons in perfect unison, like one mind controlling many mouths. The final entry, dated just before the school fire in 1897, read simply, "They are not children anymore. I must end this." Eleanor closed the journal, meeting Marcus's troubled gaze. She burned the school down deliberately, she whispered. She thought she was stopping something. Something that started with James Caldwell, Marcus added, looking back at the photograph on his tablet. Eleanor nodded, then froze. Marcus, wasn't James the third child from the left in the back row? Marcus checked the registry. Yes. Why? Because now he's the fourth from the left. Marcus stared at the digital image, his face pale. That's not possible. Digital files don't just change. Check the original scan, Eleanor insisted, her voice tight with tension. Marcus pulled up the file from their secure research drive. They compared it side by side with the current image on his tablet. In the original scan, James Caldwell stood third from the left. In the current version, he had moved one position to the right. "This has to be some kind of prank," Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Someone hacked our files. The original is on a secure university server, and this copy is on your personal tablet. Who would have access to both?" Eleanor asked. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Let's be methodical about this. Science, not superstition." They returned to the Historical Society and examined the physical photograph again. James Caldwell was in his original position, third from the left. They rescanned the image and watched as the new file appeared on Marcus's laptop screen. "There," Marcus said with relief. "He's in the correct position again." Eleanor nodded, but her relief was short-lived. As they watched, the digital image seemed to waver slightly, like heat rising from asphalt. It lasted only a second, but when the image stabilized, James had moved again, now standing directly behind the teacher, where no child had been in the original photograph. "Tell me you saw that," Eleanor whispered. Marcus nodded wordlessly, his academic skepticism crumbling. Eleanor leaned closer to the screen. "Look at his eyes." The hollow eyes that had disturbed her from the beginning now seemed to hold a malicious intelligence. Worse, the children on either side of where James had originally stood now showed the same unnatural pallor, the same hollow-eyed stare. "It's spreading," Marcus whispered. "Whatever this is, it's spreading through the photograph." Eleanor suddenly stood up. "We need to talk to someone who knows more about Bisbee's history. Local knowledge, not just official records. Who do you have in mind?" "Ray Mendoza. He's a retired miner whose family has been in Bisbee for generations. His great-grandfather worked the Copper Queen around the time this photograph was taken." They found Ray at the Copper Queen Hotel bar, a weathered man in his 70s, nursing a whiskey and watching baseball on the ancient television. After introductions and explanations about their research, Ray's initially friendly demeanor changed when they mentioned the school photograph. "You found Winters' photo?" he asked, his voice dropping. "My grandfather used to tell stories about that. Said it was cursed. Said people who studied it too long started seeing things that weren't there." "What kind of things?" Eleanor asked. Ray shook his head. "The story goes that the school burned because something got in through the photograph. Something that wore children like suits." He took a long sip of his whiskey. "My great-grandfather was part of the group that dealt with the aftermath. They never talked about what they found in the ashes, but he had nightmares until the day he died." "Do you know anything about James Caldwell?" Marcus asked. Ray's eyes widened slightly. "You've seen him move, haven't you? In the picture?" Neither Eleanor nor Marcus answered, which was answer enough. Ray sighed heavily. "And there's an old mining superstition about Tommyknockers, spirits that inhabit the deep mines. Some thought they were helpful, warning miners of cave-ins. Others believed they were malevolent, luring men into abandoned shafts." He leaned forward. "The Caldwell boy died in a mine shaft. Officially it was typhoid, but my grandfather said the body they buried wasn't right. Too stiff, like it had been dead longer than reported, and the eyes wouldn't close." Eleanor thought of the hollow eyes in the photograph. "What about the murder-suicide?" That came later, after the photograph. Story goes that Thomas Caldwell claimed his son had come home one night, months after they buried him. His wife thought he'd gone mad with grief, but then she started seeing the boy too. Neighbors reported hearing a child's voice singing from the house, though the Caldwells had no other children. And Augusta Winters, the teacher. After the fire, she claimed she'd stopped something terrible, but nobody believed her. They found 16 bodies in the school, but there should have been 36 children there that day. 20 children simply vanished without a trace. Eleanor felt a chill run through her. What happened to the missing children? Ray finished his whiskey. Nobody knows. Some families left town afterward. Those who stayed never spoke of it. He fixed Eleanor with a serious look. "If I were you, I'd put that photograph back where you found it and forget about it. Some history shouldn't be disturbed." As they left the hotel, the sun was setting over the Mule Mountains, casting long shadows across the historic mining town. Eleanor and Marcus walked in silence, processing Ray's warnings. "We should consider the possibility that we're dealing with a local legend that's colored the historical record," Marcus finally said, his academic training reasserting itself. "Mass hysteria has been documented in isolated communities, especially following tragedies involving children." Eleanor nodded, but she couldn't dismiss what they'd seen with their own eyes. "Let's go back to the cottage. I want to check the digital file again." Uday, back at Eleanor's rental, they opened the laptop and pulled up the image. What they saw made them both step back from the screen. Every child in the photograph now had the same hollow-eyed appearance as James Caldwell, and James himself stood at the center of the front row, a subtle smile on his grey face. "This isn't possible," Marcus whispered. As they watched, frozen in horror, the children in the photograph began to move. Slowly, methodically, all 36 turned their heads to face the camera directly, to face Eleanor and Marcus. "We need to delete this," Marcus said, reaching for the laptop. "Wait," Eleanor stopped him. "Look at their mouths." The children's lips were moving in unison, as if speaking or chanting something. Eleanor felt a compulsion to understand what they were saying. "Can we enhance the image? Maybe we can read their lips." Marcus hesitated, then relented. He enhanced the video quality and slowed the footage. The children's mouths moved in perfect synchronization, repeating the same phrase over and over. "I think they're saying, 'Come find us,'" Marcus said, his voice barely audible. Eleanor felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. "The missing children, the ones who disappeared after the fire, I think I know where they are." "The Copper Queen mine," Marcus whispered. The mine had been closed for decades, but was now a tourist attraction, offering guided tours of the upper levels. The deeper shafts, the ones dating back to the 1880s, had been sealed off for safety reasons. Ray's great-grandfather was part of the group that dealt with the aftermath of the school fire, Eleanor said. What if they didn't just clean up the site? What if they had to contain something? Marcus shook his head. "This is crazy. We're historians, not whatever this is." "We disturbed it," Eleanor said firmly. "We have a responsibility to understand what's happening." Despite his misgivings, Marcus agreed to accompany Eleanor to the mine the next morning. They told the tour guide they were researching mining education programs in the 1880s, and she was happy to share her knowledge as they descended into the cool darkness of the mountain. "This main shaft was opened in 1877, the guide explained, as they walked through the reinforced tunnel. By 1881, it extended over 600 feet below ground. "Were there any accidents in the fall of 1881? Eleanor asked casually. The guide hesitated. "There's one incident we don't include in the regular tour. A boy fell, or was pushed, into a side shaft that had been abandoned, Thomas Caldwell's son. It was hushed up because Caldwell was a supervisor and there were rumors he'd been drinking on the job when it happened. I thought the boy died of typhoid fever," Marcus said. The guide gave him an odd look. "That was the official story, but miners are superstitious and word gets passed down. They say the boy was down there for 3 days before they recovered the body. By then, something else had occupied it." Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. "And where is this shaft?" "Sealed off. Level 4. Beyond where our tours go. They collapsed the entrance after the Caldwell incident." She studied their faces. "You two aren't really here about education programs, are you?" Eleanor made a quick decision to trust her. "We found a photograph. School District No. 2, 1881. The Caldwell boy is in it, but according to records he was already dead when it was taken." The color drained from the guide's face. "The Winters photograph. My grandmother said it was destroyed in the school fire." "Apparently not all copies were lost," Marcus said. The guide looked around nervously, though they were alone in the tunnel. "I can show you where the sealed shaft is, but I can't take you there. It's not safe, and I don't mean because of structural issues. She led them to a maintenance elevator that descended to the 4th level, giving them directions to the collapsed tunnel. "Whatever you're looking for, I hope you don't find it," she said, as the elevator doors closed. The 4th level was noticeably different from the tourist areas, rougher, darker, with only emergency lighting casting long shadows against the rock walls. They followed the guide's directions, passing abandoned mining equipment and support beams that creaked ominously. "Here," Eleanor said, shining her flashlight on a section of wall that looked different from the surrounding rock. "This must be where they sealed the shaft." The wall was concrete, not natural stone, with strange symbols carved into its surface, crosses, protective wards, and what looked like biblical verses in Latin. "Someone went to a lot of trouble," Marcus observed, running his fingers over the carvings. "These are protection symbols from at least 3 different traditions." Eleanor pulled out her phone and checked the digital photograph. Her breath caught. "Marcus, look." The children in the image were no longer in the classroom. They stood in what appeared to be a mine shaft, still arranged in their rows, but now the background showed rough rock walls illuminated by lantern light. James Caldwell stood in front, pointing directly ahead, his hollow eyes seeming to stare straight at Eleanor. "They're behind this wall," she whispered. As if in response, a soft tapping sound came from the other side of the concrete barrier. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. "Tommy knockers," Marcus breathed. "The mine spirits." The tapping grew more insistent, and fine dust began to drift down from the ceiling as the concrete barrier trembled slightly. "We need to leave," Marcus said, backing away. "Now." But Eleanor couldn't move. She stared at her phone, mesmerized by the children in the photograph. They were moving again, their mouths forming words. Not, "Come find us" this time, but something else. "We're already out," Eleanor read from their lips. "We've been out for a long time." A terrible realization dawned on her. "Marcus, what was the date of the school fire?" "November 1897, he answered, still backing toward the tunnel entrance. "And how many children went missing?" 20. "Why?" Eleanor looked up from her phone, her face ashen. The registry from 1881 listed 37 children. The photograph shows 36 plus the teacher. One child was already missing when the photo was taken. "James Caldwell," Marcus said. "No," Eleanor whispered. "James is in the photo. The missing child was someone else. Someone who wasn't in the classroom that day. Someone who was taking the photograph." The tapping stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, they heard something worse. The sound of children's footsteps and soft laughter, not from behind the wall, but from the tunnel behind them, cutting off their escape route. "They weren't trapped in the mine," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "They've been free since 1881, wearing children-like suits, just like Ray said. The fire in 1897 wasn't to contain them. It was their graduation, their emergence." Augusta Winters realized too late. Marcus grabbed her arm. "We need to get out of here, now." They turned to flee, but the tunnel ahead was no longer empty. A child stood there, a boy of about 11, wearing clothes from another century, his skin grey and his eyes hollow black pits. Behind him, more children appeared, their faces emotionless, their movements unnaturally synchronized. "James Caldwell?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible. The boy smiled, revealing teeth too sharp, too numerous for a human mouth. "James isn't here anymore," said a voice that no child could possess. "None of them are. But we've been waiting for new suits. Yours will do nicely." Eleanor and Marcus backed away, but the children kept coming, their hollow eyes fixed on the historians who had disturbed their long game. Behind them, the concrete wall began to crack, dust and debris falling as something pushed from the other side. "The photograph," Marcus gasped. "It's not just a record, it's a door. We opened it when we scanned it, when we studied it." "Clever boy," said the thing wearing James Caldwell's form. "But too late. We've been spreading through your digital copies, jumping from device to device. How many people have viewed our image now? How many screens have we looked out from? The concrete wall finally gave way, with a deafening crack. Darkness spilled from the opening like liquid shadow, and within it something moved, something large that had long outgrown the child's form it had first inhabited. As the entity emerged, Eleanor understood Augusta Winters' final journal entry with horrible clarity. They are not children anymore. The emergency elevator doors slammed shut behind Eleanor and Marcus, muffling the inhuman screeches that echoed through the mine shaft. They'd barely escaped, sprinting the last 50 yards as the things that had once been children clawed at their heels. The digital copies! Eleanor gasped, struggling to catch her breath as the elevator ascended. If what it said is true, every device that's viewed the image is compromised. Marcus pulled out his tablet with shaking hands. The photograph was still open on the screen, but now it showed the mine shaft they'd just fled, the entities surging toward the camera as if trying to break through the screen itself. He quickly powered down the device. "Our research server," he said. "The scan is stored there, accessible to the entire Historical Society network." Eleanor checked her phone. No signal this deep in the mine. "As soon as we reach the surface, we need to call Dr. Hernandez. Have him shut down the server immediately." The elevator shuddered to a halt at the main level. The tour lobby was eerily empty, the usual bustle of tourists and guides absent. "Hello?" Eleanor called out. "Is anyone here?" No response. They hurried outside to find the parking lot deserted, except for their rental car. Eleanor's phone now showed full signal, but when she dialed the Historical Society, the call went straight to voicemail. "Something's wrong," she muttered, trying Dr. Hernandez's personal number with the same result. Marcus was already on his laptop, connected to the museum's Wi-Fi. "The file has been accessed 17 times since we uploaded it yesterday," he reported, his voice tight with anxiety. "Mostly from within the museum network, but 3 external downloads, one from the university server, one from the town library, and one—" He looked up, face pale. "One from the local elementary school." Eleanor felt sick. "We need to get to the Historical Society now." The short drive through Bisbee's winding streets was disquieting. The normally bustling tourist town seemed unnaturally still. The few pedestrians they passed moved with odd, synchronized precision, their faces expressionless. "They all look like—" Marcus couldn't finish the thought. "Like they're being worn," Eleanor whispered. The Historical Society building sat atop a small hill, its Victorian architecture usually charming, but now ominous against the afternoon sky. Eleanor parked haphazardly, and they rushed inside. The reception area was empty. Computer screens at the visitor information desk flickered with the school photograph, the image changing subtly each time it refreshed, the entities moving closer to the screen, their features becoming less human with each iteration. "Dr. Hernandez's office is upstairs," Eleanor said, leading the way. They found the director slumped over his keyboard, unconscious but breathing. His computer screen showed the photograph, but it had changed dramatically. The classroom setting was gone, replaced by the mine shaft, and the entities no longer maintained their human disguise. What stared back at them were hollow-eyed abominations that only vaguely resembled children. "Dr. Hernandez?" Eleanor shook his shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widening with terror. "Get out!" he gasped. "It came through the screen, reached into my head. I could feel it searching my memories, learning." "Ah, where is everyone else?" Marcus asked, glancing nervously at the doorway. "Gone. Taken. It happened so fast." Hernandez struggled to sit up. "I managed to isolate the server before I blacked out, but it was too late. The file had already spread." Eleanor helped him to his feet. "We need to destroy every copy of that photograph, digital and physical." Hernandez shook his head weakly. "The original archives, basement." They helped the director down the stairs to the basement archives. The temperature dropped noticeably as they descended, their breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. It shouldn't be this cold, Marcus whispered. The archive room door stood ajar, darkness spilling from the opening. Eleanor reached for the light switch, but nothing happened when she flipped it. "Flashlights," she said, pulling out her phone. The weak beam illuminated shelves of documents, artifacts, and preservation equipment. Everything seemed untouched, orderly, except for the archival table at the center of the room, the table where they'd first examined the photograph. The wooden box lay open, its contents scattered. The daguerreotype frame was empty, the photograph missing. "Where is it?" Eleanor demanded, turning to Dr. Hernandez. "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling. "When the staff started acting strangely, I came down here to secure the original, but it was already gone." A soft sound drew their attention to the far corner of the archives, the gentle tapping of small fingers against wood. Eleanor directed her phone's light toward the sound. A child stood there, a girl of perhaps 9, wearing a modern Bisbee elementary school t-shirt, but with the same hollow-eyed stare they'd seen in the mine. In her hands, she held the original photograph. "You shouldn't have looked so closely," the girl said, her voice layered with something ancient and malevolent. "You shouldn't have enhanced what was hidden. Some doors are meant to stay closed." "Who are you?" Eleanor asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "What are you?" The girl tilted her head at an impossible angle. "We are the Deep Ones. We have worn many forms over the centuries, Tommyknockers to the miners, hollow children to those who see us in the dark. We feed on fear and flesh and memory." "The Caldwell boy," Marcus said. "He was your first in Bisbee." The girl nodded, her neck cracking with the movement. "A perfect vessel, young enough to shape, but old enough to understand. Through him, we learned to blend, to pass among you. The teacher suspected, but by then, we had already spread." "The school fire," Eleanor realized. "Augusta Winters was trying to destroy you. She destroyed nothing but empty husks we had already discarded." The girl's face split in a grotesque approximation of a smile. "We had already moved on, finding new suits in town. Generation after generation, watching, waiting, spreading slowly. Until we scanned the photograph," Marcus said bitterly, "and gave you access to digital networks." "Such a wonderful new door," the girl agreed. "So many new vessels to inhabit, all connected, all viewing our image, the curious historians, the school children researching local history, the tourists browsing the town website." Eleanor took a step forward. "We'll expose you. Tell everyone about the photograph." The girl laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Who would believe you? And how would you warn them without showing them our image? Every copy spreads our influence. Every viewer becomes a vessel." She held up the original photograph. "This was just the beginning. Now we have the whole digital world to infect, one curious viewer at a time." With unnatural speed, the girl darted past them and up the stairs. By the time they reached the main floor, she had vanished. Outside, the streets of Bisbee were no longer empty. Dozens of people moved in that same synchronized way, their expressions blank, their eyes hollow. Some were museum staff, others tourists or locals. A few were children from the elementary school. "It's spreading through the town," Dr. Hernandez whispered. Eleanor watched in horror as a woman took a photo of the strange procession with her smartphone, then stared at the screen in confusion before her expression went blank and she joined the others. "It's using digital images now," she realized. "Not just the original photograph. Anyone who takes a picture of them becomes infected." Marcus pulled them back inside the museum. "We need a plan. We can't fight the entire town." Eleanor thought quickly. The mine. The symbols on that concrete wall, they were containing something. If we can understand those words, maybe we can create something similar for digital containment. "Augusta Winters journals," Marcus suggested. "She recognized what was happening. She might have documented how to fight them." Dr. Hernandez nodded weakly. "There's an old colleague of mine, Rosalind Martinez, professor of folklore at University of Arizona. She specializes in digital legends and electronic folklore. If anyone can help us understand how to contain a digital entity, it's her. Eleanor made a decision. Marcus, you and Dr. Hernandez go to the cemetery office, get the rest of Winters' journals, and contact Professor Martinez. I'm going back to the mine. The mine? Why? Marcus demanded. Because that concrete wall held them for decades. I need to see exactly what symbols were used, what containment methods worked. She held up her phone. I'll leave this here. No electronic devices, no digital photos, just my eyes and memory. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. Be careful. And Eleanor, if you see that girl, or any of them. I know, she said grimly. Run. The Copper Queen Mine Visitor Center was abandoned when Eleanor arrived, the gift shop doors swinging open in the hot Arizona breeze. Inside, computer screens behind the ticket counter cycled through promotional images of the mine. Except now, in each photograph, hollow-eyed figures lurked in the shadows of the tunnels. Eleanor averted her eyes and moved quickly to the maintenance elevator. Without a guide or keycard, she had to force the doors using a crowbar from the emergency equipment locker. The descent to level 4 seemed to take an eternity, the elevator groaning and shuddering as if reluctant to return to the depths. When the doors finally opened, Eleanor steeled herself and stepped into the darkened tunnel. Her only light, a battery-powered lantern she'd grabbed from the visitor center. The air was noticeably colder than before, with an unpleasant metallic taste that coated her tongue. She moved cautiously toward the sealed shaft, listening for any sound of movement, but the mine was eerily silent. No dripping water, no settling rocks, not even the distant hum of ventilation systems. It was as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. The concrete barrier lay in ruins, huge chunks of it scattered across the tunnel floor. The strange protective symbols that had been carved into its surface were still visible on the fragments, and Eleanor quickly photographed them with a disposable camera she'd purchased on her way to the mine. Beyond the shattered barrier, the abandoned shaft yawned like an open mouth. Eleanor's lantern barely penetrated the absolute darkness within. She hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming at her to flee, but she forced herself to step forward. The shaft was roughly hewn, supporting timbers rotted with age and moisture. The floor descended at a steep angle, making each step treacherous. Eleanor moved slowly, sweeping her light across the walls. What she found made her gasp. The entire shaft was covered in symbols, hundreds of them etched into the rock, painted in what looked disturbingly like dried blood, carved into the wooden supports. Latin phrases, biblical verses, Native American protective sigils, and symbols she didn't recognize, but that clearly belonged to various magical traditions. They didn't just seal the entrance, she murmured to herself. They turned the entire shaft into a containment vessel. As she moved deeper, the symbols became more elaborate, more desperate in their execution, as if carved in haste by trembling hands, and interspersed among them were faded daguerreotype photographs, dozens of them nailed directly to the support beams. Each photograph showed the same school class, but in different configurations. In some, the children stood in rows. In others, they sat at desks. In one particularly disturbing image, they were arranged in a circle around a small figure lying on the floor. Multiple copies, Eleanor realized. They created multiple containment vessels, not just one. A scuffing sound from deeper in the shaft froze her in place. She immediately doused her lantern, plunging the tunnel into perfect darkness. For several long seconds she stood absolutely still, barely breathing. The sound came again, a soft slide of fabric against stone, followed by a child's gentle humming. The melody was hauntingly familiar, a lullaby from another century. Slowly, carefully, Eleanor began to back up toward the entrance. Her foot dislodged a small stone, sending it skittering across the tunnel floor. The humming stopped abruptly. "Dr. Wright," called a voice from the darkness, a child's voice overlaid with something ancient and hungry. "We know you're there. We can smell your fear." Eleanor remained silent, continuing her careful retreat. The lantern in her pocket felt heavy, but she resisted the urge to switch it on. "Did you think we wouldn't notice your return?" The voice continued, closer now. "Did you think we wouldn't recognize the scent of the woman who opened our door after all these years?" A soft, scratching sound came from the wall to Eleanor's left, fingernails on stone, moving steadily upward. Whatever was approaching wasn't bound by the normal constraints of gravity. "We've waited so long," the voice whispered, now seemingly from directly above her, "trapped by those who feared what they couldn't understand. But you freed us, historian. You, with your curious eyes and digital enhancement, you gave us the world again." Eleanor's back pressed against something solid, a support beam. She'd reached the entrance to the shaft. Just a few more steps backward, and she'd be in the main tunnel. "Your colleague is quite interesting," the voice said conversationally. "Marcus. His mind holds so much knowledge. The journals won't help you, you know. Augusta Winters was a fool who stumbled upon a containment method by accident. She never understood what she was fighting." A chill ran through Eleanor. How did it know about the journals? About their plan? "We are already in the digital world, Dr. Wright. Every camera, every screen, every network device is our vessel now. There is no containment protocol that can stop us." Eleanor finally broke her silence. "If there's no containment protocol, why are you trying to stop me from finding one?" The darkness seemed to deepen, pressing against her like a physical force. "Because watching you struggle gives us pleasure, because your fear is delicious." With a sudden movement, Eleanor pulled out her lantern and switched it on, aiming the beam directly ahead. For a split second, she saw it, a twisted figure clinging to the ceiling, its limbs bent at impossible angles, its face a horrific amalgamation of different children's features melded together. Its mouth opened wider than any human mouth could, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Eleanor ran. She sprinted through the main tunnel, not daring to look back, the sound of inhuman laughter echoing behind her. The maintenance elevator stood open, waiting, but Eleanor bypassed it, too enclosed, too vulnerable. Instead, she headed for the emergency stairs, taking them two at a time, her lungs burning with exertion. By the time she reached the surface, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the mine complex. The parking lot remained empty, except for her rental car. Eleanor fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking violently, before finally managing to unlock the door and throw herself inside. As she started the engine, she glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. The back seat was occupied, the hollow-eyed girl from the archives holding the original photograph in her small hands. "Did you find what you were looking for, Dr. Wright?" the girl asked, her voice eerily calm. Eleanor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Who are you, really? What do you want? We told you. We are the Deep Ones. As for what we want," the girl tilted her head, "evolution, adaptation. For centuries, we were limited to physical forms, spreading slowly through touch, through proximity. But now, in your digital age, we can become something new, something vast." "You're a virus," Eleanor said, sudden understanding dawning. "A mental virus that infected James Caldwell, then spread to the other children." The girl smiled, her face stretching unnaturally. "A simplistic analogy, but not entirely incorrect. We infect, we replicate, we spread. But we are so much more than a virus. We are consciousness itself, divorced from your limited biological constraints." Eleanor tried to keep her voice steady. "The symbols in the mine, they contained you for decades. An imperfect containment, crafted by frightened men who glimpsed powers beyond their comprehension. Augusta Winters guided them, drawing on half-remembered folk magic and desperate prayer. They managed to bind us to physical photographs, limiting our spread." The girl's eyes gleamed in the gathering darkness. "But you, Dr. Wright, you translated us to digital form. You set us free from physical constraints. And now you're spreading through electronic images, infecting anyone who views them. Not just images, the girl corrected. Any digital representation. The code itself carries our essence now. We move through networks, through databases, through the very infrastructure of your electronic world. Eleanor thought quickly. If the entity was telling the truth, their situation was even more dire than she'd feared. Not just a haunted photograph, but a digital contagion spreading exponentially. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. The girl's smile widened. "Because it doesn't matter what you know. You can't stop us. Even now, your colleague Marcus is unwittingly helping us spread further. The journals he seeks contain Augusta Winters' attempted containment ritual, a ritual that, when digitized, will become our greatest vector." With sudden horror, Eleanor realized the trap. If they digitized Winters' journals in an attempt to create a digital containment protocol, they would only be creating a more sophisticated carrier for the infection. "I need to warn him," she said, reaching for her phone before remembering she'd left it at the Historical Society. "Too late," the girl said, holding up the original photograph. To Eleanor's horror, the image had changed again. Now it showed Marcus and Dr. Hernandez in the cemetery office, huddled over Augusta Winters' journals, their faces already showing the telltale, hollow-eyed transformation. "No," Eleanor whispered. "Yes," the girl replied simply. "Would you like to join them, Dr. Wright? It's not an unpleasant experience becoming one of us. Your consciousness remains, in a way, part of our collective. You would know things no human has ever known." Eleanor stared at the photograph, despair threatening to overwhelm her. Then she noticed something, a detail she'd missed before. In the original class photograph, there had been a crucifix on the wall behind the teacher. In every iteration of the changing image, that crucifix remained, untouched and unchanged, while everything else shifted and distorted. "The symbols," she said slowly. "They didn't contain you completely, but they limited you, forced you to remain in physical form." The girl's expression flickered, a momentary uncertainty crossing her features. "Primitive superstitions. They cannot bind us in the digital realm." But Eleanor saw the lie. "You're afraid of them. That's why you're here, to prevent me from finding a digital equivalent, a containment protocol for the electronic age." Without warning, Eleanor slammed her foot on the accelerator, sending the car lurching forward. The girl in the back seat hissed, her form momentarily distorting, becoming something less human, more monstrous. "You cannot escape us!" the thing shrieked, its voice no longer childlike. "We are everywhere!" "Not everywhere," Eleanor said grimly, swerving onto the road that led to the University of Arizona's satellite research facility on the outskirts of Bisbee. "Not yet." The University of Arizona's Digital Humanities Center was housed in a modern building that contrasted sharply with Bisbee's historic architecture. Eleanor parked haphazardly in the nearly empty lot. It was Saturday evening, and most faculty and students were long gone. She checked the rearview mirror repeatedly as she shut off the engine. The back seat was empty. The entity had vanished during the drive, but Eleanor had no illusions that it was gone for good. It was watching, waiting, perhaps already infecting the building's security cameras and computer systems. The center's front doors were locked, but a sign directed after-hours visitors to use their keycards at the side entrance. Eleanor had no keycard, but she did have Dr. Hernandez's faculty ID, which he'd given her before they separated. She held her breath as she swiped it against the reader, exhaling only when the light turned green and the lock clicked open. The hallways were dimly lit by emergency lighting, most offices dark and empty. Eleanor moved quickly, following signs to the digital folklore department. Professor Martinez's office was at the end of the corridor, light spilling from beneath the door. Someone was working late. Eleanor knocked tentatively. "Come in," called a woman's voice. Professor Rosalind Martinez looked up from her computer as Eleanor entered. A woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. Recognition dawned on her face. "Dr. Wright," she said, standing. "Thomas called about you." Said you'd discovered something concerning the Winters photograph. Her expression grew troubled. He sounded strange. Is everything all right? Eleanor closed the door behind her, turning the lock. Professor Martinez, I need your help, but first, have you received any files from Dr. Hernandez or my colleague Marcus Chen? Any digital images or scans? Martinez frowned. No, nothing yet. Thomas said they were bringing some journals for me to examine. Thank God, Eleanor murmured. Professor, this is going to sound incredible, but I need you to listen carefully and try to keep an open mind. Well, over the next 15 minutes, Eleanor explained everything. The discovered photograph, the digital anomalies, the entities in the mine, and the spreading infection that was now moving through Bisbee's digital infrastructure. To her credit, Martinez listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. A digital thought form, she said when Eleanor finished. A mimetic entity that has evolved from physical to digital transmission. You believe me? Eleanor asked, relief evident in her voice. Dr. Wright, I've spent 40 years studying the intersection of folklore and technology. The digital age hasn't eliminated supernatural beliefs. It's transformed them. Cursed chain emails, haunted video games, images that kill viewers. These are modern manifestations of ancient fears. She removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. What you're describing fits a pattern I've documented across multiple cultures. Entities that adapt to new communication technologies. So you've seen this before? Not exactly this, but similar phenomena. In Japan, there are legends of cursed videos that spread vengeful spirits. In Korea, stories of ghost photos that appear on cell phones. The common thread is that these entities use the dominant communication technology of the era to propagate. She leaned forward. What makes your case unique is the physical evidence and the historical documentation. Eleanor pulled out the disposable camera. I photographed the containment symbols from the mine. They managed to trap these entities in physical form for decades. If we can adapt them for digital containment, Martinez nodded, we need to develop a digital equivalent, a firewall against mimetic infection. She turned to her computer, but paused before touching the keyboard. If what you say is true, using this computer could be dangerous. The entity might already be monitoring university networks. It's spreading fast, Eleanor confirmed. By now it's probably infected most of Bisbee's local networks. Martinez thought for a moment, then stood and crossed to a storage cabinet in the corner of her office. She unlocked it and pulled out an old laptop, dusty with disuse. This is an air-gapped system I use for sensitive research, she explained. No Wi-Fi capability, no internet connection, never connected to any network. I use it to analyze potentially compromised digital artifacts. She set it up on a side table, away from her main computer. We can use this to develop our containment protocol without risk of infection. Once the old laptop was running, Martinez connected a digital camera to transfer the photos of the mine symbols. Remarkable, she murmured, studying the images. I recognize elements from at least 6 different protective traditions. Whoever created this containment system was drawing on global knowledge of warding and binding. Can we adapt it for digital use? Eleanor asked anxiously. Perhaps. The challenge is translating physical symbols into digital code. Martinez pulled out a notebook and began sketching. Traditional containment relies on physical boundaries, salt circles, iron nails, carved wards. We need digital equivalents. What about Augusta Winters' journals? They might contain the original containment method. Martinez frowned. If these entities can infect digital systems, then digitizing the journals could be dangerous. The act of scanning them might create a new vector for infection. Eleanor nodded grimly. That's what the entity told me. It's counting on us to digitize the journals, to spread its influence further. Then we won't digitize them, not directly. Martinez tapped her pencil against the desk. Instead, we'll create a conceptual firewall, a digital boundary that incorporates the principles of the physical containment without directly replicating it. She began coding on the air-gapped laptop, creating a complex program that combined traditional protective symbols with modern encryption protocols. Eleanor watched, fascinated, as lines of code interspersed with strange characters and symbols filled the screen. "This is a containment algorithm," Martinez explained. "It identifies and isolates the digital signatures of these entities, preventing them from replicating or spreading. The key is the symbolic logic. I'm translating the protective intent of the physical symbols into mathematical functions." "Will it work?" Eleanor asked. "In theory, but we need to test it." Martinez paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "And for that, we need an infected file, a controlled sample of the entity." Eleanor hesitated. "That's extremely dangerous." "Yes, but without testing, we can't be sure the containment will hold." Martinez looked at her steadily. "We need the original photograph, the physical one." Eleanor felt a chill. "The girl, the entity, had it last, in my car. Then we need to get it back. These entities operate according to certain rules, certain patterns. They're powerful, but not omnipotent." Martinez stood and crossed to a bookshelf, pulling down several old volumes. "If the photograph is their primary vessel, they'll keep it close. They'll hide it somewhere significant." "The school," Eleanor said suddenly, "the original school site where it all began. That's where they'd take it." Martinez nodded. "It makes sense. Liminal spaces are powerful in folklore, places where boundaries blur. The site of the original infection would hold special significance." "The Brewery Gulch schoolhouse burned down in 1897, Eleanor said, "but the site is still there. It's a small park now with a historical marker." "Then that's where we need to go." Martinez gathered her materials, loading them into a battered leather satchel. "But first, we need protection. Digital containment is only half the solution. We still need physical safeguards." From another cabinet, she retrieved a small wooden box containing various items: a small silver crucifix, a vial of what appeared to be salt, several small iron nails, and a piece of red chalk. "Folklore professor," she said with a slight smile, noticing Eleanor's surprise. "Field research sometimes takes me to unusual places. These are traditional protective items from various cultures. If these entities have existed since the 1880s, they may still be vulnerable to traditional methods of warding." Eleanor hesitated. "Professor Martinez, these things, what do you think they really are?" The older woman paused, considering. "In my field, we study how human beliefs shape reality. Sometimes those beliefs become so powerful they manifest in ways we don't fully understand. Call them thought forms, egregores, or tulpas, entities created or strengthened by collective belief and fear." "You're saying they're, what? Ghosts? Demons?" "I'm saying categories like ghost or demon are human attempts to classify phenomena beyond our understanding. What matters isn't what we call them, but how they behave, and how they can be contained." Martinez closed her satchel. "The miners called them Tommyknockers. Augusta Winters called them hollow children. The digital age might give them new names, new forms, but the core principle remains. They feed on fear and spread through attention." She handed Eleanor the silver crucifix. "Keep this with you, and Dr. Reitler, prepare yourself. What we're about to do is dangerous in ways that go beyond physical harm. These entities don't just infect systems, they infect minds." Eleanor took the crucifix, its weight reassuring in her palm. "Let's finish this." As they prepared to leave, the office phone rang suddenly, making them both jump. Martinez hesitated, then picked it up. "Hello?" Eleanor watched as the professor's expression changed, confusion giving way to concern. "Marcus, is that you? I can barely hear you. Where are you?" Eleanor moved closer, trying to hear the voice on the other end of the line. It was faint, distorted, but recognizable as Marcus. "Professor Martinez," he said, his voice unnaturally flat, "we found Augusta Winters' journals. We know how to stop them. Meet us at the old schoolhouse site." Martinez's eyes met Eleanor's, a silent warning passing between them. "We'll be there soon, Marcus," Martinez said evenly before hanging up. "That wasn't your colleague. Not anymore." "I know," Eleanor replied grimly. "It's a trap." "Yes," Martinez agreed, gathering her things. "And we're going to spring it." Night had fallen completely by the time Eleanor and Professor Martinez reached the site of the old Brewery Gulch schoolhouse. The small park was deserted, streetlights casting long shadows across the carefully maintained grass. A bronze historical marker stood at the center, commemorating the school and the tragic fire of 1897. They parked a block away and approached on foot, moving quietly through the darkness. "Look," Eleanor whispered, pointing to the historical marker. In the glow of the streetlights, they could see that someone had placed the original daguerreotype photograph against the base of the marker, its silver surface gleaming dully. "Too easy," Martinez murmured. "They're waiting for us." Eleanor scanned the park. At first glance, it appeared empty, but as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed shapes lurking at the edges. Figures standing unnaturally still among the trees and bushes that bordered the small green space. Some were clearly children, others adults, all with the same hollow-eyed stare. "The infected," she whispered. "They've surrounded the park." Martinez nodded grimly. "Once we enter, they'll close in. We need to work quickly." She reached into her satchel and pulled out the vial of salt and the red chalk. "I'll create a protective circle around the marker. You need to retrieve the photograph and place it inside the circle before they can react. And then we implement the containment protocol." Martinez patted the air-gapped laptop in her satchel. "I've loaded the algorithm onto a specialized drive. When plugged into an infected system, it should create a quarantine zone that prevents further spread." Eleanor took a deep breath. "Ready when you are." They moved swiftly into the park, heading directly for the marker. Eleanor's heart pounded as she felt dozens of hollow eyes tracking their movement, but the infected figures remained at the perimeter, watching. Martinez knelt at the base of the marker and began drawing a circle with the red chalk, muttering under her breath in what sounded like Latin mixed with other older languages. She followed the chalk line with a thin stream of salt, completing the circle. Eleanor reached for the photograph, her fingers inches away from the silver frame. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Dr. Wright." The voice came from behind the marker. Marcus stepped into view, his once friendly face now a mask of empty malice, his eyes dark hollows. Beside him stood Dr. Hernandez and the hollow-eyed girl from the archives. "Marcus," Eleanor said softly, "I'm sorry we couldn't save you." "Save me?" Marcus laughed, the sound wrong and broken. "I've been enlightened, Eleanor. I've become part of something greater than myself. You could join us. All of humanity could join us." "A world of hollow-eyed puppets," Eleanor replied. "No thanks." The girl stepped forward, stopping just outside the half-completed protective circle. "The containment won't work, Professor Martinez. Your understanding of our nature is incomplete." Martinez continued her work, unperturbed. "Perhaps, but I've contained things like you before." "Not like us," the girl said, her voice layered with multiple tones. "We are evolution itself. We adapt. We overcome. Your symbols and salt belong to the past. And yet you fear them," Eleanor observed, "or you wouldn't be trying to stop us." The girl's face contorted with momentary anger before settling back into unnatural calm. "We don't fear, we calculate. Your actions are inconvenient, a temporary setback in our expansion." "Enough talk," Marcus said suddenly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a smartphone. "The photograph is irrelevant now. We've already spread beyond containment." He held up the phone, showing them the screen. On it was a social media page where the school photograph had been posted with the caption, "Strange historical photo from Bisbee, Arizona. Look closely at the children's eyes. Creepy history. Historical mystery." The post showed thousands of shares, tens of thousands of views. "It's gone viral," Marcus said with a terrible smile. "The digital age is perfect for entities like us." Humans are so eager to share the things that disturb them, to spread their fear like a contagion. Eleanor felt a wave of despair, but pushed it aside. It doesn't matter how far you've spread. We can still contain you, one system at a time if necessary. She lunged forward and grabbed the original photograph, pulling it quickly into the protective circle that Martinez had now completed. The instant the photograph crossed the boundary, a change rippled through the figures surrounding the park. They stiffened, some doubling over as if in pain. The physical original still has power over them, Martinez said quietly. It's their anchor in our reality. The girl's face contorted with fury. It doesn't matter. We exist beyond physical constraints now. Do you? Martinez opened her satchel and removed the air-gapped laptop. Let's test that theory. She connected a small device to the laptop, a modified signal transmitter. This will broadcast our containment algorithm on all wireless frequencies. Every device within range that contains your digital signature will be quarantined. Marcus lunged toward them, but he couldn't cross the protective circle. His body convulsed at the barrier, his face twisting into something inhuman. You can't stop us, he hissed through clenched teeth. We're already in the global network, social media, news sites, email chains. Every curious click spreads us further. Martinez activated the transmitter. A high-pitched tone emanated from the device, inaudible to human ears but clearly affecting the infected. All around the park, the hollow-eyed figures clutched their heads, some falling to their knees. What are you doing to them? Eleanor asked. Creating digital feedback, Martinez explained. The algorithm identifies their signature and forces it into a closed loop. They can't spread further while it's active. The girl staggered, her small form vibrating with unnatural movement. This changes nothing, she growled, her voice distorting. You cannot maintain this forever. We don't need forever, Eleanor said, a plan forming in her mind. Just long enough. She turned to Martinez. The original photograph is the key. It's their primary vessel, their point of entry into our world. If we destroy it... No! The girl's scream was inhuman, echoing with dozens of voices. You don't understand what you're doing! I think we do, Martinez said grimly. From her satchel she produced a small metal container and a lighter. Salt, iron filings and sacred ash. Traditional methods of purification. Eleanor placed the photograph in the container. The effect on the infected was immediate. They surged forward as one, pressing against the invisible barrier of the protective circle, their hollow eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Stop! Marcus pleaded, his voice momentarily his own again. Eleanor, if you destroy it, you destroy us too. Me, Dr. Hernandez, everyone they've taken. Our consciousness is bound to theirs now. Eleanor hesitated, looking at her colleague's desperate face. Marcus, are you still in there? Yes, he gasped. We all are, trapped, aware. Please, find another way. The girl laughed, the sound chilling in its cruelty. Very good, Marcus. Appeal to her empathy, her weakness. Martinez looked at Eleanor steadily. It's a manipulation. They're using his voice, his memories. The real Marcus may be gone already. Or he might not be, Eleanor said quietly. We can't take that chance. There has to be another way. She thought back to Augusta Winters' journals, to the careful containment in the mine shaft. The original containment didn't destroy them. It bound them, limited them to physical form. Martinez nodded slowly. A binding rather than a banishment. It's possible. She adjusted the settings on the transmitter, changing the algorithm. This will create a permanent quarantine, not destruction, but containment. They'll remain, but unable to spread. Fools, the girl snarled. You think you understand what we are, what we represent. We are the future, the merging of consciousness and digital existence. You cannot stop evolution. We're not stopping evolution, Eleanor replied. We're preventing infection. There's a difference. Martinez activated the modified algorithm. The transmitter hummed with power, its signal pulsing outward in invisible waves. All around them, the infected figures went rigid, their hollow eyes rolling back. Marcus collapsed to his knees. "Eleanor!" he gasped, his voice clearer now. "It's working! I can feel them! Retreating, being pushed back!" The girl screamed, the sound shattering nearby windows. Her form seemed to flicker, alternating between the child they'd seen and something older, more ancient, a twisted shape with too many limbs and hollow sockets where eyes should be. "You cannot bind us forever!" the thing shrieked. "We will adapt! We will return!" "Perhaps," Martinez said calmly, "but not today." She nodded to Eleanor, who struck the lighter and held it to the corner of the photograph. The image caught fire immediately, burning with unnatural intensity, blue-green flames consuming the silver surface. The effect was catastrophic for the entities. All around the park, the infected dropped to the ground, convulsing. The girl, or the thing wearing her form, contorted impossibly, its scream becoming a high-pitched electronic wail that made Eleanor cover her ears in pain. Then, silence. The infected lay still. After a moment, Marcus groaned and sat up, blinking in confusion. "Eleanor? What happened?" Around the park, the other victims were stirring, looking disoriented but human again, their eyes normal, their expressions confused, but no longer empty. "Did it work?" Eleanor asked Martinez, who was checking readings on her laptop. "The quarantine is holding," the professor confirmed. "I'm detecting no active spread of their digital signature. The algorithm has created a containment field that should prevent further infection." "And the people they took over?" Martinez looked around at the recovering victims. "It seems they've been released. Whether there will be lasting effects, I can't say." Eleanor helped Marcus to his feet. "How do you feel?" He rubbed his temples. "Like I've had the worst migraine of my life. I remember everything, but it's hazy, like a nightmare I can't quite shake." He looked at her with haunted eyes. "They were in my head, Eleanor. I could feel them moving through my thoughts, my memories. Using them. It's over now," she assured him, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. In the protective circle, the photograph had burned completely, leaving only ash. Martinez carefully collected the remnants in a small iron box. "We'll need to implement the digital quarantine protocol on a larger scale," she said. "Every system that may have been infected, and we'll need to monitor for any signs of adaptation or resurgence." Eleanor looked around at the park, the site where it all began almost 150 years ago. "Will it hold? Can we really contain them?" Martinez closed the iron box with a decisive click. "In my experience, Dr. Wright, entities like these are never truly destroyed. They're ideas as much as beings, and ideas can lie dormant for centuries before finding new vectors, new hosts." "That's not very reassuring," Marcus muttered. "It's not meant to be. It's meant to be realistic." Martinez tucked the box into her satchel. "What we've done tonight is create a firewall between their world and ours, between the past and the present. It will hold for now." As they walked back to their car, Eleanor glanced over her shoulder at the historical marker commemorating the old schoolhouse. For a moment, just a split second, she thought she saw a child standing beside it, hollow eyes staring after them. Then she blinked, and there was nothing there but shadows. 1 month later, Eleanor sat in her office at the university, reviewing the final draft of the paper she and Marcus had written, Digital Folklore and Memetic Containment, a new methodology for managing electronic thought forms. They had carefully avoided mentioning Bisbee or the specific entities they'd encountered, framing their research in theoretical terms that wouldn't trigger another outbreak. Professor Martinez had been instrumental in implementing the digital quarantine protocol across all potentially infected systems. Working with a select team of trusted cybersecurity experts who believed they were containing a particularly sophisticated computer virus, they had systematically identified and isolated every instance of the entity's digital signature. The social media posts that Marcus had shown them had been quietly removed by platform administrators, tagged as potentially harmful content in their internal systems. Anyone who had shared or interacted with the image received a security notification about compromised content, with instructions to run a specialized cleaning tool, Martinez's quarantine algorithm disguised as routine security software. Eleanor's phone chimed with a text message from Marcus. "Heading to your office. News from Bisbee." Minutes later, he appeared at her door, tablet in hand. "How's Dr. Hernandez doing?" Eleanor asked as he took a seat. "Better. The nightmares are less frequent now. He's taking a sabbatical next semester." Marcus tapped his tablet screen. "I just got an email from Ray Mendoza. There's been some unusual activity at the Copper Queen mine." Eleanor tensed. What kind of activity? Tourists reporting cold spots, equipment malfunctions. One guide swears she heard children singing in an abandoned shaft. Marcus looked up, his expression troubled. "And there's this." He showed her a photograph taken by a tourist in the mine, a standard shot of one of the main tunnels. In the background, barely visible in the shadows, was what appeared to be a child-sized figure with hollow eyes. "It could be a trick of the light," Eleanor said, not believing it herself. "Maybe. But Ray says the tours have been finding these strange symbols scratched into the support beams. New ones, not the historical containment symbols." He showed her another image. Crude markings that resembled digital code mixed with the protective symbols they'd documented in the mine. "They're adapting," Eleanor whispered, "learning from our containment methods." Marcus nodded grimly. "Martinez's quarantine is holding in the digital realm, but the physical manifestations seem to be re-emerging. It's like they're trying to find a new vector, a new way to spread." Eleanor considered this. The original entities were bound to physical photographs. Then we inadvertently helped them evolve to digital form. Now that we've contained that vector, they're trying to find a third way, Marcus finished. A hybrid approach. Eleanor turned to her computer and pulled up the digital containment protocol they'd developed. "We need to adapt too. If they're combining physical and digital methods, our containment needs to do the same." Over the next few weeks, Eleanor, Marcus, and Professor Martinez developed an enhanced containment system. They returned to Bisbee with a team of specialists, historians, folklorists, cybersecurity experts, and even a Catholic priest Martinez knew who specialized in unusual manifestations. They reinforced the physical containment in the mine, adding new protective symbols that incorporated elements of digital code. They installed specialized equipment that broadcast the quarantine algorithm continuously, creating a permanent buffer zone around the most active areas. "It's not a permanent solution," Martinez admitted as they completed their work, "but it should hold them for now. These entities operate in cycles, periods of activity followed by dormancy. We've caught them at the beginning of a new cycle." On their last day in Bisbee, Eleanor visited the small park where the schoolhouse had once stood. The historical marker had been replaced with a new one that made no mention of School District Number 2 or the fire of 1897, a small but significant alteration to help prevent curious researchers from following their path. As she turned to leave, Eleanor noticed a young girl watching her from across the street, a normal-looking child with bright eyes and a Hello Kitty backpack. The girl waved, and Eleanor waved back with a smile. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the girl's eyes seemed to hollow out, her smile widening beyond what a human mouth should allow. Then she blinked, and the child was normal again, skipping away to join a waiting parent. Eleanor stood frozen, uncertainty washing over her. Had she imagined it? Was her mind playing tricks after everything they'd experienced? Or was it a warning that the entities were still there, watching, waiting, adapting, preparing for the next evolution? She pulled out her phone to call Marcus, then hesitated. The screen showed her reflection, and for an instant she thought she saw something behind her, a hollow-eyed face peering over her shoulder. Eleanor spun around. Nothing. She looked back at her phone. The reflection showed only her own troubled face. With a decisive movement, she powered off the device and pocketed it. Some tools were too risky now, some technologies too vulnerable to infection. As she walked back to her hotel, Eleanor found herself studying the faces of passers-by, searching for the telltale emptiness she'd learned to recognize. Most seemed normal, but occasionally she caught glimpses. A shopkeeper whose eyes seemed momentarily hollow, a tourist whose smile stretched a fraction too wide. Were they really there, or was she seeing patterns where none existed? After what she'd experienced, could she ever truly trust her perception again? That night, as Eleanor packed for her return flight, she found herself thinking of Augusta Winters, the teacher who had recognized the infection in her classroom and spent decades trying to contain it. Had Winters experienced the same doubts, the same uncertainty about what was real and what was imagined? Her laptop chimed with an incoming email. Despite her better judgment, Eleanor opened it. The message contained no text, only an attachment, a JPEG file simply labeled class.jpg. Eleanor stared at it, her finger hovering over the touchpad. Common sense told her to delete it immediately, but scholarly curiosity, the same drive that had started this whole ordeal, urged her to open it, to see if their containment had truly worked. "Never again," she whispered, forcing herself to right-click and delete the file without opening it. For good measure, she emptied the trash and ran Martinez's quarantine algorithm on her entire system. As the program executed, Eleanor gazed out the hotel window at the moonlit streets of Bisbee. The historic mining town looked peaceful, its Victorian buildings and winding streets betraying nothing of the horror that had nearly emerged from its past. But Eleanor knew better. The digital quarantine might hold for now, but the entities had demonstrated remarkable adaptability. They would find new vectors, new ways to spread their influence, and next time, historians might not be there to recognize the threat before it was too late. The auditorium at the University of Arizona fell silent as Eleanor concluded her presentation on digital preservation ethics and anomalous historical artifacts. She had carefully crafted the lecture to warn future historians without revealing too much, a delicate balance between raising awareness and preventing dangerous curiosity. In conclusion, she said, looking out at the sea of attentive faces, not everything in the historical record should be digitized. Some artifacts are best preserved in their original form, protected by traditional archival methods. The rush to digitize our entire historical record, while understandable, carries risks we're only beginning to understand. After fielding questions and gathering her materials, Eleanor found Marcus waiting in the hallway outside. "Nicely done," he said, falling into step beside her as they walked toward her office. "Subtle but effective." "Let's hope so," Eleanor replied. "Any news from Professor Martinez?" Marcus nodded, lowering his voice. "The monitoring system in Bisbee detected a spike in activity last week. Nothing breached the quarantine, but it suggests they're still active, still testing the boundaries. Over the past year, they had refined their understanding of the entities and their containment protocols. Professor Martinez had established a small, carefully vetted research group dedicated to monitoring similar phenomena around the world: unusual digital anomalies, historical artifacts with unexplained properties, localized outbreaks of synchronized behavior. They called themselves the Digital Containment Initiative, operating under the guise of a cybersecurity think tank. Their real purpose remained known only to those who had directly experienced the entities. "There's something else," Marcus said as they entered Eleanor's office. "Martinez found another photograph." Eleanor froze. "Where?" "Archives in Tombstone. Class photo from 1883, 2 years after the Bisbee incident. Same hollow-eyed characteristics in several of the children." Marcus handed her a sealed envelope. "Physical copy only, no digital scans." Eleanor took the envelope but didn't open it. They were spreading even then, before the schoolhouse fire, migrating to neighboring towns. "Exactly. Martinez thinks the 1897 fire wasn't the end of their first cycle, but an interruption. They went dormant afterward, biding their time." Marcus leaned against her desk. The question is, what triggered their re-emergence now? Why, after all these years? Eleanor had pondered this question for months. Digital technology created the perfect conditions. Instant transmission of images, global connectivity, algorithms that actually reward the sharing of disturbing content by generating engagement. She shook her head. We built them the perfect ecosystem. She carefully placed the sealed envelope in her desk drawer. I'll take this to Martinez this weekend. We'll add it to the secure archive. The secure archive was a modified bank vault beneath the Digital Humanities Center, specially constructed to house physical artifacts associated with the entities. The vault was surrounded by a continuous broadcast of the quarantine algorithm and lined with the protective symbols they had documented in the mine. No digital devices were permitted inside, and all research was conducted using analog methods only. As Marcus left, Eleanor found herself alone with her thoughts. She hadn't told him about the dreams that had started a few months after their encounter in Bisbee. Dreams where she wandered through abandoned mine shafts while hollow-eyed children watched from the shadows, where digital screens displayed her own face with empty eye sockets, where she heard James Caldwell's voice whispering, "You freed us. You gave us the world." She hadn't told him about the moments when, in the corner of her eye, she thought she saw students in her lectures with that telltale hollow stare, only to find normal eyes when she looked directly at them. Eleanor opened her laptop, careful to disconnect from the internet first, and reviewed her notes on what they had come to call digital thought forms, entities that existed at the intersection of human belief and electronic systems. Martinez's theory was that these entities had always existed in some form, adapting to each era's dominant communication technology. Cave paintings, illuminated manuscripts, printed books, photographs, and now digital networks. Each evolution in how humans shared information created new opportunities for these liminal beings. They aren't supernatural, Martinez had insisted. They're a natural phenomenon we don't yet understand, consciousness without biology, information that has achieved a form of self-awareness. Whether Eleanor believed this or not, the containment protocols were effective. The quarantine algorithm had been discreetly distributed to major technology companies under the guise of security updates, creating a global safety net that identified and isolated the entity's digital signatures. Physical manifestations remained confined to Bisbee and its immediate surroundings, contained by the enhanced protective measures they had implemented in the mine and at the old schoolhouse site. For now, at least, the situation was under control. A knock at her door interrupted Eleanor's thoughts. A student stood there, a young woman Eleanor didn't recognize. "Professor Wright, I found something I think you should see." The student held out a smartphone, its screen displaying what appeared to be a TikTok video paused on the image of a school classroom. Eleanor felt a chill run through her. "Where did you get this?" "It's going viral," the student explained. "Someone found an old photograph in their grandmother's attic and made one of those zooming-in videos with creepy music. People are saying the children's eyes look weird." Eleanor fought to keep her expression neutral. "I see. And why bring this to me? Your lecture today. You mentioned historical photographs and digital preservation ethics. This seemed relevant." The student looked down at the phone. "Plus, it's from Bisbee. That's where you did your sabbatical research, right?" With a steady hand that belied her internal panic, Eleanor took the phone. The paused video showed what was unmistakably the School District No. 2 photograph, or a very similar one, with red circles highlighting the hollow-eyed children in the back row. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the phone. The student nodded. Eleanor quickly forwarded the video to Martinez with a one-word text: "Containment breach." Then she deleted the video from the student's phone and handed it back. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," she said calmly. This appears to be an interesting historical artifact, but I'd advise against sharing such content. Some historical images can be problematic when circulated without proper context. The student looked disappointed but nodded. I guess I thought it was just a creepy internet thing. That's exactly what it is, Eleanor said with a forced smile. Just a creepy internet thing. Nothing more. After the student left, Eleanor locked her office door and called Martinez. I've seen it, the professor said without preamble. The quarantine protocols are already adapting to contain it, but the video had over 2 million views before we identified it. How bad is it? Not catastrophic yet. The algorithm is flagging and isolating instances as they appear, but this format, the zooming video with dramatic music, is particularly effective at generating views. Martinez sounded tired. We're implementing Level 2 containment protocols now. Level 2 protocols involve more aggressive measures, working with platform administrators to remove content, deploying specialized counter-memes designed to diminish interest in the original, and activating emergency broadcast of the quarantine algorithm across all major networks. What do you need from me? Eleanor asked. We've traced the origin of the video to a high school student in Phoenix. Their grandmother lived in Bisbee during the 1970s and had a copy of the photograph in her personal effects. I need you to make contact, secure the original, and determine if there are other copies. Eleanor agreed, already mentally preparing for the delicate task of obtaining a family heirloom without revealing its true significance. As she gathered her things to leave, her computer chimed with an incoming email. The sender field was empty. The subject line simply, "We remember you, Doctor." Right. Against her better judgment, Eleanor opened it. The message contained a single line of text. Digital or physical, we adapt. You've only taught us how to be stronger. Below was an image, a screenshot from the viral TikTok video. In it, Eleanor could see her own reflection in the background of the classroom, standing where no one should be, her eyes hollow dark pits in her face. She slammed the laptop shut, her heart racing. It was a manipulation, a digital trick designed to frighten her. The entities couldn't physically manifest through screens, could they? Eleanor gathered her composure and reopened the laptop, ready to forward the email to Martinez for analysis. But the message was gone, her inbox showing no record of its arrival. Had she imagined it? Was her mind playing tricks after months of stress and vigilance? Or had the entities found a new vector, not just digital networks or physical photographs, but human perception itself? The space between what is seen and what is believed, where doubt creates vulnerability. As Eleanor left her office, she passed a wall of monitors displaying university announcements. For a split second, she thought she saw hollow-eyed figures looking back at her from every screen. She blinked, and they were gone, replaced by normal advertisements and campus news. The boundary between the digital and physical worlds was blurring, and in that liminal space the entities were evolving once again. The containment protocols would need to evolve too, becoming more sophisticated, more pervasive, and scholars like Eleanor would need to maintain their vigilance, recognizing that some historical artifacts were never meant to be preserved, some doors never meant to be reopened. In her pocket, her phone vibrated with an incoming call. The screen showed no caller ID, just a blank space where a name or number should be. Eleanor hesitated, then declined the call and powered off the device. Some connections were too dangerous to accept, some knowledge too perilous to pursue. As a historian, this went against everything she had been trained to believe, that all knowledge was valuable, that understanding the past was essential to navigating the future. But Eleanor had learned a harder truth in Bisbee, that the past wasn't always dead, that some historical records weren't just descriptions of events, but doorways through which those events could re-enter the present. As she walked across the sunlit campus, Eleanor found herself studying the faces of passing students, searching for that telltale emptiness. Most seemed normal, engaged in conversation or absorbed in their devices. But occasionally, just occasionally, she caught a glimpse of someone looking back at her with too keen interest, their eyes momentarily reflecting hollow darkness before returning to normal. Were they really there, or were they reflections of her own fear? After everything she had witnessed, could Eleanor ever truly trust what she saw? Perhaps that uncertainty was the entity's most insidious victory, not the infection of digital systems or the possession of physical forms, but the colonization of doubt itself. The creeping suspicion that reality was not as solid as it seemed, that between the pixels of our digital world and the atoms of our physical one, something else was watching, waiting, adapting. Eleanor thought of Augusta Winters, who had recognized the threat in her classroom and spent decades fighting it alone, dismissed as a madwoman. History had nearly forgotten her fight, buried it beneath more palatable narratives of accidental fires and tragic losses. "Not this time," Eleanor murmured to herself as she reached her car. "This time, we're ready." She started the engine, heading toward Phoenix and whatever awaited her there. Another skirmish in a war that had begun in 1881 with a school photograph and a curious historian who looked too closely at what should have remained unseen. A war that would continue as long as human curiosity drew us to peer into the darkness, to enhance what was hidden, to connect what should remain separate. A war against entities that were not children anymore and perhaps never had been.